Hi, I'm Alfreda Robinson-Dawkins, the founder of the National Women's Prison Project, and I'm here to share a little bit about the experience of being a female and incarceration. Many times we share the statistics over and over about men and how many men have gone to prison, and yes, men do dominate the number of people that are in prisons, but we seem to always look at the woman as invisible or not really there, as if she doesn't count. And there are a lot of different circumstances when you look at women and female incarceration that really needs to be talked about. It needs to be something at the table for people to consider so that we can look at how to curb this and have perhaps other alternatives rather than taking women away from the community. A little bit about my story. I was incarcerated for 10 years. I had a son who did sell drugs in Baltimore, Maryland, and as a result of making a phone call trying to collect money to pay his bail, they ended up saying that I was collecting a drug debt. And I'd never been involved with the criminal justice system at all, and I thought certainly when I went in and told my truth, they would see that I had nothing to do with it, and something totally different happened. They ended up saying every act was in the furtherance of a conspiracy, me co-signing for his car, everything that David did, and it was connected to me. I ended up being found guilty. One, I was charged with two things: use of a telephone device to threaten, hurt, harm, or kill an individual, and that was using the telephone to call the young man who sold drugs for my mother for my son to get money that he owed my son to pay his money, his bail. That was thrown out, use of a telephone device. But my charge on conspiracy I was found guilty of and sentenced to 121 months, which I stood there doing the math and could not believe they had just found me guilty and had to do 10 years. My life as I knew it as a guidance counselor at Dunbar High School certainly changed. All of the education that I'd had with bachelor's in sociology and 2 master's degrees, I had to now use to figure out how to survive in a world that I knew very little about, other than being a person who went into prison ministry for my church. Now I was an inmate, and I really had to wrap my head around that. But during my 10 years of incarceration, and I did 9 years and actually 6 months, I had some time taken away from me when it was time for me to come to the halfway house, because my son's girlfriend, who had testified against us, said she was afraid for her life, and they had to relocate her, and it took a couple months off of my halfway house. But I wouldn't have even known what she looked like. However, during my time of incarceration, seeing so many women, seeing so many mothers, so many grandmothers, so many, oh my God, whole families just destroyed by incarceration, federal prison with people who spoke every language from every country. It was truly a United Nations, and there was never a moment of peace. You hear noise all the time. But after coming home and recognizing, even my probation officer couldn't help me find a job, recognizing that there were so many obstacles, so many barriers, filling out a job application, feeling comfortable in my own skin, feeling comfortable with family members that I'd been isolated from for so many years. How do I fit back in? I recognized that there was a need to do something and started the National Women's Prison Project to be able to help women feel comfortable in their skin, navigate what freedom actually means, and to then make choices that would mean they would never go back to prison again. But in some of my research, just looking at women as opposed to men, and I'd like to share some of that research, we now have over 205,000 women incarcerated that are in jail and prison systems across the United States. That's an extremely high number. People don't realize it's that many women in prison. And people don't realize that now women are going to prison at a rate 4 times 8% more than the number of male prisoners. Male prisoners are now going 2.7%. So the increase was almost twice that of males. Also, just with HIV, in 2006, 2.6 of all female state prison inmates were HIV positive compared to 1.8 of males. As far as mental health, of course, female inmates had a much higher rate of mental health issues than male inmates, 73% of female versus 55% of males. And My research actually comes from Department of Justice stats on female offenders. As far as physical or sexual abuse, nearly 8 in 10 female mentally ill inmates reported physical or sexual abuse, and of the sexual abuse, 57.2% of the females reported abuse before they were admitted into state prison versus 16.1% of males. Nearly 6 in 10 women in state prisons had experienced physical or sexual abuse in the past, and 69% of them report that abuse before the age of 18. Nearly 7 in 10 women under correctional sanction have minor children, and there are more than 1,300,000 children that belong to female offenders. When we get to the number of either male or their father incarcerated, the number goes up even higher. As far as drug use, on every measure of drug use, women have used more drugs than men. And when looking at that as a fact, women anesthetize their pain. They are going through all of what they're going through just trying to survive, so they use drugs even heavier, and that's a stat that they actually need to look at when looking at drug treatment programs that are actually designed for men. As far as family violence, 73% of family violence victims were female, and this, all of these stats are in a report called Returning Home, Understanding the Challenges of Prisoner Reentry. But my job was to look at each and every one of those things, and instead of just thinking we'll give a woman a job when she comes home, we had to look at her femality. We had to look at those things about a woman that made her a woman, to look at why she offended, so that we can come up with the correct kinds of solutions to help her then make decisions to never commit crimes again. We had to look at the absence of being first out of the family, what it means when mom is gone and who's taking care of the children, but then we have to look at what it means to take the female out of the community. When we remove the maternal backbone, I call it the softness of the community, and we don't have those figures to continue to do the job of being that nurturing person in the community. So when I talk about females and I looked at the gender-specific issues that relate to females and their incarceration, one, we have to acknowledge that females are not invisible. We have to acknowledge that their pre-criminal lives need to be examined, and what they went through with the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, all of what they've gone through to survive. 3, we have to recognize that women are survivors, and we have to treat them as such and not the victim mentality. And then we have to give them alternatives and options so that they can fit back in. They can again be contributing members of society. They can add to the tax base, but they can also add to the maternal base, and we can continue to be the nurturers that are needed in this community. Thank you for allowing me to share.